So nice to see you all. Uri, you take it away.
Right. So good evening, everyone, and so glad that you could join us. Sorry again for the technical difficulties. My name is Uri, and I'm the executive director of the Slikfa Center for Jewish Life at Yale. And together with Rabbi Jason Rubenstein, the Howard M. Holtzman Jewish chaplain, I want to welcome everyone who's joined us tonight for this evening's Slikfa online salon entitled "Changes Are Afoot. Hear What's Happening to Make Jewish Spaces LGBTQ+ Inclusive" with my friend and colleague, Miryam Kabakov, the executive director of Eshel. First and foremost, Miryam, I really want to offer on my own behalf and on behalf of our whole community, our deepest condolences on the recent loss of your father. Shiva just ended a few days ago, and our thoughts are with you and your family. May you find comfort among all mourners at this difficult time.
Thank you so much.
Sure. By way of introduction, we're here to celebrate Pride Month with this special program. But before we do so on a parallel track, just for a moment, it's really important that we note the fragile and challenging moment that the Jewish community everywhere is facing right now in the face of rising anti-Semitism. This moment is incredibly challenging for all of us, and those who live in the world of college campuses feel it very acutely, including here at Yale. With so much uncertainty coming out of the pandemic, following the recent fighting in Israel and Gaza, and discontent abounding everywhere, and especially on social media, we are mindful and concerned about the potential for anti-Semitic actions and speech when students return in the fall in person. Let me be clear.
Hey, David, I got it.
Anti-Semitism is anathema to everything that Slikfa Center and Yale stands for. We stand with Jewish students and against those who wish our community harm. Everyone has the right to their own opinions, and we need not like or agree with every position we encounter. At the same time, Slikfa Center will stand for the rights of Jews to live peacefully and in constructive lives at Yale and beyond its gates, period. Our whole reason for being is to lift up and strengthen the vitality of Jewish community in all its complexity and diversity. Anti-Semitism is a threat to all of that, and as such, we condemn it in the strongest possible terms. I want to take this opportunity to remind everyone of the rapidly dwindling opportunity you have to fight anti-Semitism and support vibrant Jewish life at Yale and receive Yale Reunion and Capital Campaign credit at the same time by making a gift to Slikfa Center's Building Forward Capital Campaign. The renovation we're doing right now has three parts. First, to install critical security infrastructure by rebuilding the entryway and the terrace to make the building harder to attack, and increasing the number of and coverage of security cameras around the building. We're fully renovating our kitchen and dining hall to ensure that we can continue to provide healthy meals and meaningful community gatherings for generations to come, and of course, to bring the building up to modern safety and environmental standards. As long as Slikfa Center is around, there will be opportunities to support Jewish life at Yale, but the window to receive credit expires in just a couple of weeks on June 30th, and it will not be extended or repeated for a long time. This is your chance. This twin commitment to vibrant Jewish community and diversity is what brings us to tonight's topic around making Jewish spaces inclusive to those who identify as LGBTQ+ and their allies. Slikfa Center provides a leading voice in organizing programming in this area at Yale, both in and beyond the Jewish community, offering programs in both Jewish and interfaith and cross-cultural settings. We bring the full scope of our intellectual, spiritual, creative, and educational resources to bear in helping our community find meaning in Jewish identity in all of its stripes, politically, religiously, ethnically, and in so many other facets. We are so proud to celebrate Pride Month in this way and to welcome Miryam as our guest. While Miryam herself is not technically a Yaley, she is married to one Dr. Mara Benjamin and has been a New Haven resident and part of the Yale community. And so we're proud to have you here with us tonight. And Slikfa Center is also proud to partner regularly with Eshel for various programs during the year. On a personal note, this is my second campus working with Miryam, with whom I have a longstanding relationship outside of work. And so it is indeed a pleasure to introduce tonight's session, which I'll do right now. As usual, Rabbi Rubenstein will introduce tonight's speaker and the program. He will take questions and comments in the chat, which you can find along the bottom of your Zoom screen. We want to remind you that the session is being recorded and will be available on our website along with our previous recordings of other salons. We hope you'll take a moment to fill out a brief survey at the end. We're so excited to share these salons with all of you in keeping with Slikfa Center's goals to explore the intersection of what is Jewish, American, and Yale in our constantly changing world. Jason, take it away.
Ori, thank you for that introduction. Thank you to all of you for being here. And Miryam, thank you especially to you for being here, as Ori said, so soon after the loss of your father. It means a lot. It's a testament to you, your relationship with him, and your commitment to this work. And I want to say thank you for the work that you do. We've gotten to know each other through a bunch of avenues, including most recently, before the pandemic, Slikfa Center hosting the Eshel staff retreats, which is a source of joy and pride to have you all in the building. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Miryam, her work is kind of deep and broad. She's an award-winning editor. Her 2010 volume, Keep Your Wives Away from Them, of lesbian Jewish writing is somewhere on a bookshelf in this house and well-worn, and you should all read it. And her work as the founding social worker at Footsteps, and more recently as the executive director at Eshel, has really reshaped the Jewish landscape for LGBTQ folks in Orthodoxy and beyond. And so, Miryam, I just want to say how we here at Slikfa kind of feel every day through our students the impact that your work is making, and know that we just get the tiniest bit of the energy and support you're putting out in the world, and to appreciate that. And so I wanted to ask if you could just start us off by describing, what is Eshel? What is the work you're doing? Who are the people and communities you serve? And what are you trying to accomplish these days, pandemic and otherwise?
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, good. So I'll just say, just before I go into what my work is about, I'll just say how, deeply connected I feel to the Slikfa Center. And the Slikfa Center is not just for students at Yale, but like for the whole community. We had our baby naming of our first baby there, and we used to come on Shabbat and other events. So thank you guys so much for doing everything you're doing. And thank you for being a home to Eshel, because we are a staff of 7 people who are all over Boston, New York, and the Slikfa Center is like where we all have to travel only an hour and a half or 2 to get to be together. So pre-pandemic, we were meeting once a month at the Slikfa Center. So thank you guys so much. So I'll just say basically what Eshel's mission is, the ultimate mission is to create an orthodoxy that is inclusive of its LGBTQ members in a full way, like in a way that it includes everybody else who it claims to include. The way that we do that is we build community amongst people. So we work with people who would maybe think that they are the only human being on the planet, and believe me, that is still the case, where people think that they're the only one who is LGBTQ and Orthodox, and we help them find other people who are also the same in that way. And we also have an incredible parent community, parents of LGBTQ folks who are Orthodox. And they all struggle. They all struggle with their beliefs. They struggle with fitting into their culture. And it's really, really hard for them because, when you are, in an Orthodox community and you are becoming aware how you don't fit in such a fundamental and deep way that you can't actually change, it becomes clear to you that you either have to leave or you have to figure out a way to stay. And figuring out a way to stay means figuring out how to change the people's minds around you. So that's what Eshel's here to do. We're here to help change hearts and minds around LGBTQ identities so that people who are Orthodox don't have to choose. An hour before I joined onto this call, somebody sent me a link to an op-ed by Molly Meisel from YU, a student at YU who is starting the, there's a lawsuit now against YU. And, it's all about like, I don't want to have to choose. This is how I grew up, and this is what I want to be, and this is what I want to continue to have in my life. This religion sustains me, it helps me, and I have my practice, I have my beliefs, and there's no reason why I have to give it up. So that is what Eshel is about in a nutshell. We do a lot of other things, to actualize our mission. We do trainings with day schools. We have one tomorrow morning. We do a lot of, we have an outreach project to Orthodox rabbis across North America called the Welcoming Shuls Project, where we've interviewed over 210 Orthodox pulpit rabbis to see where they are on a scale of openness and inclusion. And it's not to say that any one of them is 100% where we want them to be, but they've started to think about it, and they've started to open up and have a dialogue with us, which is huge. And, shifting some thoughts about potentially, they don't know, not all of them know that they have LGBTQ members. We know that they do. And, how they might welcome them once, they know who they are.
Wow.
So I hope that answered
the
it.
work is so varied, and the way you described how helping each individual is not just about helping an individual. It's they're embedded in a network of relationships, and it means the people in their family, their parents, their community, their neighbors, the people they go to shul with, etc. You can't just extract someone. And maybe you could just share, is there a story? I'm not going to ask you for the single representative story, but just to kind of humanize this some for us, give a story that you find yourself thinking back to, or especially, kind of proud of or moved by.
Let's see. Wow, I have a lot of stories, but my father's on my mind, and I guess I could share a story about him because it really tells the story of the work that we do. So my father passed away 2 weeks ago. He's a very, very special man. He went to Harvard, so he has feelings about Yale, but just joking. Good feelings, I think. Rivalry, good feelings though. My when I came out to my parents, they did not know a single other person who had a gay child, so they thought. And their struggle with accepting me had a lot to do with being scared to tell their friends, and being afraid that they would get kind of ostracized. And they weren't in a Black hat community. They were not in the Hasidic community. They were simply in a modern Orthodox community. So after my mother passed away, that's the 2 months later, I became one of the leaders at Eshel. And my parents had such a hard time. They really, really, really were great parents, both of them. And they strived to understand me, but they couldn't because they didn't have anyone to talk to. So then my father, without my mother in his life, was able to, just kind of move. I'm one of 6, and we're all different religious flavors of Orthodoxy. And he joined each one of us in our journey of who we were. So with me, he jumped on the Eshel bandwagon, and he came to the first parent retreat. And he came to many of them. And he would always tell his story of how, it took them so long to accept me, and how many wasted years that was for them. And he would sort of get up, and he was probably the oldest parent there, and kind of give a musser schmooze, like a speech telling people that they better wake up and they better, get with the program, because don't waste your time. This is your child's past. You can't change them. We didn't know that Miryam would be happy. We didn't know she'd find somebody. We didn't know she would live such an incredibly rich Jewish life with another woman. And so he would do that. And I think that a lot of the parents were very changed by him. They told me so, all throughout, but especially in his, at the Shivas, in his death, I learned the things that he did and he said to people at the retreats, which I never knew about. And so I think, to me, that's a big story about Eshel, because you meet people who are in a different journey than you. It's not a monolithic community. It's very much heterogeneous in the sense that we don't segregate, with the LGBTQ community. It's LGBTQ. It's from 18 to 85-year-olds. And we purposely do that. And it's people who are no longer religious, people are religious. We purposely do that because we want people to mentor each other and to share their journeys with each other so that they can see there's not just one way to be. So, so I'm thinking a lot about him and about how what happened for him and others at the retreat is really what happens in the way that people change. And I'll just say the reason why we bring people together over Shabbat, this is like one or two important things. We started out by having a retreat for LGBTQ Orthodox people. We had no idea who would come or how many people would come. And we rented out Isabella Friedman, which was, the capacity of like 120, 30 people at the time. And we filled up and we sold out. And so we did it every year for 10 years. And, it was just remarkable. And the important thing about that weekend, it was only once a year, but people would say things to us like, this is the one Shabbat that I can live in my truth 100%, or I'm not religious. I've left it all behind, but during the Eshel Shabbaton, I'm fully back who I was, but I'm completely who I am. So, it's like a corrective, spiritual, social experience for people. It's showing them a utopia of what could be in Orthodox community. And then we want them to go back into their communities and spread that feeling and spread that mission. So a lot of people go and they make like a mini Eshel community in their local places. And it's a wonderful community of connected people all across America and North America. People travel to each other, they'll get on a bus or a plane and visit each other for Shabbat. And so it's a very connected community. And I think I'm most proud of that.
Wow. What a beautiful testament to your father's legacy and a way of carrying his memory forward as a blessing here tonight. Thank you for sharing that story, with all of its hurt, those lost years, and also not succumbing to that being the final word, of finding a way to, grow, to change, and to use that pain as a place to reach out to others. What a gift. He gave so many people. He gave you, and now you've given to all of us here. Thank you. You mentioned people who are kind of no longer in the Orthodox community, outside of the Orthodox community. And I was wondering if you could just zoom out for a moment here and give us a picture of where kind of LGBTQ inclusion sits in the larger Jewish world. I always think back to, Judith Plaskow's writings coming out in the 1980s. When I was starting at JTS in the spring of 2005 is when the seminary decided to admit openly queer students to rabbinical and cantorial school. So it feels like it's been a long time kind of coming in different modes, but I also don't know from your vantage point what look like kind of commonalities across the movements, and also really important distinctions you'd want to draw. And I also want to invite everyone else who's gathered tonight to feel free to drop questions and comments in the chat. We'll have some time, even despite our late start, for you to ask Miryam your own questions as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. That's a really wonderful question, actually. So I believe that the first denomination to ordain queer people was the Reconstructionist movement. And then I believe it was the Reform movement, and then the Conservative movement, or maybe like in between then the Renewal movement. And so like it was sort of like a wave, and I was very much like aware of and a part of that wave. I was like living in New York, in my 30s, and we started this this organization called JAGL, Jewish Activists, Gays and Lesbians, and we used to have like panels where we spoke to rabbinical students at JTS, and I guess this was it was in the 90s, and that was my first like practice. Speaking of, telling my story and trying to like influence people in their thinking. And the students were pretty much, most of them were on board with making change. But it took a long time for the administration to get with it, and so like, and by 2005 they did, which feels like a long time to me now, but maybe it wasn't. And every single denomination had that trajectory. And now I'm seeing it happen in the Orthodox community. So it is, it's a wave, and it's moving through, and that happens with a lot of things that the modern world brings to Judaism. Like it'll start, with the Reform or the Reconstructionists, and then it goes through the other movements, and eventually the Orthodox communities like get the memo. A lot of different things that it's taken them a longer time. Not to compare, not to say being LGBTQ is like addiction, for example. But, it takes a certain person to be able to deliver the message in a certain way so that they can hear it, in the Orthodox, but also especially the Haredi community. So there's one man who's a rabbi in the Haredi community who actually is responsible for making child abuse and addiction an issue in the Haredi community. So we actually invited him to an Eshel parent retreat, and he came, and then he went back home, and he was so moved by it that he started his own Haredi kind of like Eshel, not an organization, but a group. So things are like moving, but the distinction, I guess, in the Orthodox community is really like who's the messenger, who's giving you their hechsher, their gestamp, who are you connected to? So we're basically considered treif. We're like considered not kosher in many, many circles. Now in the modern Orthodox community, we're getting closer to being accepted. So, and now the issue is way more in the forefront, and it certainly helps, that gay marriage is legal in America, especially with the modern Orthodox community.
Wow. What an interesting kind of narrative. You told it so condensed so much there into a pattern I think that we can all hold. I want to throw you kind of a theologically loaded curveball. I didn't send this in prepared questions, but I can't help but ask it. You mentioned kind of it's taking orthodoxy, well, I think you said, to get the memo or get with the program. And it's like, okay, but like there's also a certain kind of, theological commitments to truth, to the Torah, to commandments. And I was really struck, earlier when you mentioned that in some ways heartrending and also an unforgettable statement from someone, this was the one Shabbat I can live my truth, right, of being queer and being Orthodox. And you're reminding me of one of the things I heard in the Hadar Beit Midrash that I'll never forget. Was a student. It was from Rebecca Levi Epstein, who's a Jewish ethicist now, and she said, and she's she's a lesbian, and that's a major part of her work. And she's, on some level, my work is really about, my theological work is about taking very seriously that God made me the way I am, and taking very seriously that God wrote the Torah, and trying to figure out how those two can fit together. And I just wanted to ask you, what kinds of theological questions kind of come up personally for you, come up in Eshel's work? Because there is you've talked a lot about who are the messengers and sociology and activism, and that is all super important. And there's also this other question of truth, capital T, that we each possess, that God possesses, that the tradition possesses. And how does that kind of get turned upside down and reconfigured and recast in Eshel gatherings? And is there a kind of a way of thinking you could distill for us?
Sure. So I would say one of our other first projects was a speakers bureau, and we employed the method that Obama used to build his campaign. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like the I speaks to the you, I find something in myself that relates to you, and then as a we have to figure out how we relate it to this thing together and how it's important to us as a collective. So our first speakers training and all subsequent ones, we had a rule: you're never allowed to talk halacha. We're never talking about Jewish law. That is not what we're here to do, because you'll never ever win. Neither side wins, because you can argue till you're blue in the face, and you're not going to really change someone's mind about how they interpret the halacha and how they think about it. But the one thing you can do is change the way they feel, and you can reach somebody through telling stories, that are not intellectual, but they're about people and people's personal struggles. And so that is the approach that we use. We still use it, and we're beginning to work within we're working with other rabbinic organizations on responsa, so that we can actually have a body of halakha that helps move the cause of inclusion forward. So that's really an interesting, progression. But when we like are invited to speak to a group of Orthodox people, we don't talk about, halakha. We do sometimes dabble in like the theology of things. And like, well, for me, it's just very personal. When I was younger and I was coming out to myself and when I was a teenager, and I was also very religious, and I just said to myself, like, I know God loves me. I know God created me, and God would not have created me this way if he loved me. And if he wouldn't have created me this way and made me feel like I'm not supposed to live this way if he truly loves me. And so it can't be. Like, it didn't compute in my brain. And I said to myself, like, this is the way God made me. This is the way God wants me to be. So, but I did struggle. I struggled tremendously. I tried to get married. I dated men. I did all sorts of crazy things, all approaches. I went to a Kabbalist, I went to a healer. Like, I did all these things. I prayed. I did a certain line of work. The one rabbi told me, if you do this, you'll become more in touch with your feminine side and be more attracted to men. Like, I did everything, and none of that worked. So, it's not that I didn't try. And then I just decided, like, you know what, this is who I am. And I love my religious practice. Like, it keeps me sane, it sustains me. And it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to me. And it's my relationship with God. So it was very like personal, approach. And with other people out there, like with parents, it's very easy when a parent loves the child and they really want to be there for them. The parents have tremendous, theological issues, actually. Kind of interesting. We actually surveyed our parents, like we, do like studies of them. And we surveyed like 100 parents, and we asked them who is the first person that they tell about like serious matters that happen in their life. And like the second person they'll tell is their rabbi. And then we asked them, who's the one of the first 1 or 2 or 3 people that you told about your LGBTQ child. And it turns out the rabbi is the last one to find out. And, they're worried that they won't be accepted, but it's also like they're not looking to the rabbi for that acceptance. And they're also kind of afraid that they won't be. And this makes them, a lot of them have like feelings about their orthodoxy, like, it's either my child or my orthodoxy, and I have to choose my child. So it's kind of really, the parents that come to our events, they're like they're moving in that direction of wanting to be accepting. So everybody struggles. I think about Rabbi Penner, who's a YU dean at YU, and his son, Gedalia. I don't know if everybody heard this really incredible podcast that they did together. And I think that you have to listen to it, but he's like an incredible example of a father, and a father who does not know what to make of his son being gay and his orthodoxy, but he really loves his son, and I don't know. I think I don't think he has the answer. I don't think he agrees with maybe what his son thinks, but it's just an example of where parents have to go. Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question about theology. It's always fascinating to hear people's struggles. The other thing is that, when we have these welcoming shul interviews with the rabbis, so many of them we speak to are really compassionate, and they really want to like do the right thing, and they want to like accept every single person. They're like, every Jew is welcome. We accept everybody. But then when it comes to sort of like getting actual practicality, like how are you going to accept this LGBTQ person in your shul, and are you going to allow them to just like live a full life there? They have a really hard time with it. And what it boils down to is gay marriage and having same-sex relationships, especially between men, because there's such a strong prohibition against, sexual relations between men. And also marriage, there's some things in the Talmud around like a marriage contract between people of the same sex. And so it's very, very strong. And so that is hard for them theologically, because in their heart, they get it. And they're like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, Yankee grew up in the shul. We had his bris here. We had his bar mitzvah here. He's such a great guy. We love him. And yeah, he can't get married here. So like, and they feel it. But if they think about it and they struggle with that, then that is where their faith is challenged, because they can't, figure out how to make sense of why God created Yankee this way if it's against the Torah. So, it's a real challenge. I would just say it's a challenge to people's faith, and it makes them very, very uncomfortable. And so we have to sort of like sit with them in that discomfort. And then they think, if I accept the fact that it's okay that Yankee's gay, then that means I can no longer be Orthodox because the Torah isn't true. So, that's where it goes a lot of the time.
Wow. You just said so much. The part that's really kind of sticking with me is the way that you described realizing or being honest yourself with how high the stakes are for the people you're talking to, the parents and the rabbis, that the presence of, their respect for, their love for someone who's queer right in front of them is nothing less than a theological and existential crisis. And I think if I understood what you're saying right, that your kind of methodology for that is not to provide them with the answers, because there aren't any. Not to do the work for them because only they can do that, but to really earn their trust by showing that authentic, honest, humble, caring, and to be the messenger. That's the type of messenger that you described, and the type of messenger you are. It's very, very moving. Really just a moving way of being in the world, of advocating for change, even though advocating isn't quite the right word. And of, I think, especially not accepting some of the defaults of power assumptions that we might have, right? It's very easy. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. My 6-year-old is having a little bit of 7-year-old. Okay, 1 second.
That's okay. I just want to say that the other thing that is a key factor in this is, sorry, Jason, I wanted to just add something. And please go do bedtime or whatever. It's fine with me. I get it. Is that I'm doing this training tomorrow, so it's like sort of on the top of my head here, but like basically the average age of coming out today is something like 15 years old, and maybe 10 years ago it was 20. So kids are coming out younger and younger, and also in the Orthodox community. So whereas in the past, people would go, graduate their yeshiva day school, and then they might go to college, and then they like start exploring in college, and that's when they start dealing with their conflicts. Now Orthodox kids, some, obviously not all, but in some communities, like especially the modern communities, are coming out earlier. Just like across America, everyone is coming out. Kids are coming out earlier. So that means that they cannot, the administration and the teachers and the Judaic studies staff, they can no longer hide from this. It's not like the kids are right in front of them, coming out and, transitioning, and, it's just unavoidable. And if they don't handle it right, the kid doesn't do well. So then it's like right up in their face. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like I see that, the kid is depressed, or they're self-harming, or they're doing destructive things to themselves. Does that mean I have to just like accept them for who they are? Is that what that means? And then if you accept them for who they are, and who they are as gay, or whatever, transgender, then what does that mean about my belief and the Torah? So the age thing is really pushing the Orthodox community to deal with this in a much more real way.
As far as it's interesting to see how those what seem like micro changes of a few years when people come out actually changes the whole dynamics. I think I was trying to say before I had a chat with Rafael is kind of not to approach. I mean, the rabbi, our given rabbi, does hold a lot of power, but also to realize that they can hold a lot of vulnerability in a conversation and kind of coming to grips with queerness in their community and their family, and to really hold that vulnerability, and that you do as an exercise of power in a really striking way. We've talked a lot about kind of pressures on the Orthodox community. I wanted to ask you, for those who are following the new Pew survey, there was one in 2013. I mean, Pew does a million surveys, but they did one in 2013 of the Jewish community in America, and they just refreshed it this year, 2021. And one of the findings was a pretty high rate of attrition out of Orthodoxy. And then a few months ago, it was either in early 2021 or late 2020, Larissa McFarquhar wrote a long piece in the New Yorker profiling a number of families who've worked with Footsteps, and the kind of what that process has been like for parents and children. And I wanted to ask you kind of what that story looks like from your vantage point. Are you kind of, does it feel accurate? Does it feel like it captures things? Does it, and then to just add one other note, which is, I learned a few weeks ago, Professor Eliyahu Stern, who's a Jewish historian here, wrote a piece a few years back about how people leaving Orthodoxy really are not being, you could call it welcomed, are not being captured, or not being attracted to any of the other movements generally. They don't tend to join, as his research indicates, conservative synagogues, reform synagogues, renewal synagogues, et cetera. And Professor Stern was suggesting, well, the other movement should kind of wise up and kind of start programs to recruit people who are leaving Orthodoxy. And so I've been thinking a lot about that story. People who are following kind of the demographics of American Judaism are thinking a lot about that story. And wanted to ask you, since you're working with so many people who are kind of in the past at Footsteps and, on the boundary, inside, outside, both, neither, leaving, re-entering, how you kind of see that the storyline that's being told in the kind of broader Jewish world of an attrition out of Orthodoxy, even as it's growing more broadly.
Yeah. So I think like there's many, many, many different Orthodox communities. So it's really hard to speak about one, don't think that if I'm going to tell you a story about one, it's representative at all. They're all very, really different. And, the New Yorker article is about somebody in a Hasidic community, and she actually works at Eshel also. She's at Footsteps too. And, in the Hasidic community, there's a lot of black and white thinking. That is like it's built on black and white thinking. And so a lot of the people who come to Eshel who are from those communities are like really not religious anymore, because they cannot, they don't do Reform Judaism, they're not going to go to conservative shul. Like, to them, that's not Judaism. And, it's either all or nothing, so I mean, that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, but I actually wrote an op-ed to that. And I said, yes, that experience is true, and that is definitely a phenomenon. And but there's a lot of people who are not leaving and who claim that this belongs to them and they don't have to leave. And I think every community is really different. I think what we've also learned is that when family acceptance goes up, self-destructive behaviors and, homelessness and loneliness and depression go down. So it really isn't so much about the Orthodoxy, it's really about the family. And, and if a kid is going to stay close to their Judaism, it's probably because they have some kind of, stronger relationship with their parents. I mean, that's my guess. Where they're not being rejected. So, and I will also say, though, that with the parents that we work with, again, mostly modern Orthodox, they spend the first, 3 or 4 years coming to all of our groups, our phone groups, our, now Zoom groups, struggling about accepting their kids' gay identity. But then once they sort of get over that hump and they're like, okay, but then they are like, guess what? He's no longer religious. And that's like, it's worse for them than anything. Like, I don't care if he's gay, but he doesn't keep Shabbos anymore. He doesn't eat kosher. So there's a lot of pain around that for the parents, you know, especially. So I would just say that, you know, I think modern, I don't have studies to back this up. This is just what I'm noticing, is that modern Orthodox kids who come out and the parents are accepting, more often than not, they stay close to their Judaism. And some of them will go like to more conservative, you know, or egalitarian. Maybe they'll go to like a renewal situation. But, you know, it's very deep, the Orthodox thing. It's like, you know, nothing else feels real. So, you know, that guy's idea of like, why don't you do outreach to these people? Like, it's not going to fly, you know. I could. I know a lot of ex-Orthodox people who end up at Romamu, and they really love it because it has like, you know, Hasidic or like the spirituality of their background, of where they came from. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Beautiful. I mean, I have so many follow-up questions, but we have one here from Meryl and David Gordon about whether you all work with Keshet. So we'll turn the mic over to you both to ask this.
I was wondering, Miryam, if Eshel works with the organization Keshet, which is with Edith Klein, that's I assume everybody knows that it's not Orthodox specific, but Jewish inclusion of LGBTQ into Jewish.
Yeah. So I'll say the first time I met Edith was at the Slikfa Center. She approached me and about bringing Hineni and screening it there for the show that I went to. And so that's how I met Edith. And we're friends, and she's amazing. And when Eshel started, or before Eshel became really what it is, I reached out to Edith and I said, like, Edith, would you be like a mentor to me, because you've already done this, you know. I know it's a little different, but, and also like how could we work together? So she was very clear to me, and she said, you know, we don't work with Orthodox communities. We, you know, that's not that's not our audience. So in the recent past, we did some partnering with them. We've done partnering with them, with trainings together, because now Orthodox communities sometimes do reach out to Keshet for some of their work, and they ask us to partner with them because it's a certain, like, orthodoxy. There's not one orthodoxy, but like there are many different languages and words that are familiar in different sects of orthodoxy, and if you don't use those words, then people won't understand what you're saying. So we speak some of those languages, and it's a culture. And so while we sometimes partner with Keshet, the trainings that they do are very different than the kinds that we do, and they have a very head-on approach. Like, here we are, we're going to teach you this like terminology, and we're going to teach you like the right way, you know, the right ways to make inclusive spaces, and you know, they really help schools, you know, and communities like step up their game in a very clear path of a way. And in the Orthodox communities we work with, it is never a straight line. It is never a clear path. And I'm not saying they don't have complicated issues. I'm sure they do with the people they work with. But it's incredibly, like, you know, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's like this constant. And sometimes it's maddening. And yeah, so it's like, so I'll just go back to your simple question. It's not a simple answer. It just speaks to the different approaches that you need to have with an Orthodox, you know, community. Like, it's a really different ball of wax. So we do work with Keshet, and we do different things. And we dovetail around working together in certain spaces.
It's nearly 9 o'clock here. There's so much more that I feel like we could say, but more I want to say, I want to hear, I want to ask. I also want to really be respectful of your and everyone's time. So I want to pause here for station identification. Again, thank you, Miryam, so much. Everyone who's here on this call. Also my amazing colleagues. We've got Lynn and Evan and Jen, and of course, Uri, all the work and thinking and planning. Julie's here as well, which means she's now part of the team that puts these together. So it makes your presence even more special, Julie. And I want to ask you, this is a new favorite closing question here for you, Miryam. You mentioned that we like to ask everyone on these. You mentioned you love the tradition, you love Yiddishkeit, it keeps you sane, I think was the word used. If you could just share one, whether it's a practice, an idea of Judaism that's been like particularly, I don't know, they call it valuable, significant in your development into the kind of Jewish communal leader that you are.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is maybe a little bit more about like my practice. Maybe, I don't know if it's related to leadership, but maybe it is. I love to pray, and I love what my 5th grade Torah teacher calls a speed mantra. So like the Orthodox prayer is a very specific cadence and rhythm, and it just kind of moves and it's very energetic. And I find myself in egalitarian spaces. Mara is a staunch conservative Jew, and so we're in conservative community and Orthodox community, and it's different, it's not all the same. So like I find prayer, especially lately since my father passed away, I've been saying Kaddish every day. It's like the rhythm and the kavua, and just like it's just there, and following, especially the rituals of mourning, they are so brilliant. I'm so in it, and it's like, it's just a brilliant system. So I trust now, especially in these past 2 weeks, I trust this system more than I've ever trusted it. And just like the rituals. And does that change? Is that affecting my leadership? I don't know. I think maybe it's about community, because prayer is also very communal. And, when I worked at Avodah, the Jewish Service Corps, David Rosen, who was really teaching me his philosophy, and he would always say, change never happens alone. It only ever happens in community. So we are building a community of social activists. And that's how I feel about Eshel. And that's what Orthodox Judaism and much of Judaism is about. It's about community. So you can't do anything alone. And, and that's how we're moving in the world, and that's how we're making change in the world, through community. The parents meet each other, they pray together, they eat together, they bond, and then they go out into their communities, and then they tell their rabbis and their friends, about their child finally when they can come out. So I see this whole notion of change happening in community, and I know that was a little bit of a windy answer about prayer and that, but it's really, I feel it, and I'm so grateful for my religious practice. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We're all so grateful for you and your work, and your presence in this community, especially as you said at this time when, you remember your father is so fresh. It's still kind of becoming a memory of his life. And thank you for what you shared from him. I will all carry that with us for a very long time.
Thank you.
So,
thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure to be here.
And next, as we say at the end of the Seder, right, next year in New Haven, the Eshel staff will recongregate. We'll have you here.
1000%. We're ready.
Okay. Be well, everyone.
Right.
Thank you, Miryam.
Thank you, everybody.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.